I could barely breathe. Chad, my husband of 4 years, had just spoken. "You ruined everything. I didn't want this child." He packed his things with cold, methodical motions. As if he wasn't walking out of our home, but out of my life. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Chad and I had been together for 7 years. We had talked about having children one day, but it was always a distant future. We'd never set a concrete timeline. I missed my period, but I wasn't too worried until the nausea hit. One morning, I took a pregnancy test. To pink lines, pregnant. My breath caught. Shock then. A quiet joy, unexpected, but it felt right. I could do this. I could raise a child, and I would make it work. I knew I had to tell Chad. I couldn't wait any longer. I spent the next week carefully planning how to tell him. How to make it special even though it wasn't ideal. I made his favorite dinner, lasagna with garlic bread, and set the table with care, putting on the blue dress I knew he always complimented me on. I wanted it to feel like a celebration, despite the unexpectedness of it all. But when Chad came home that evening, it wasn't what I had imagined. He barely glanced at the dinner I had prepared. His focus was on his phone, eyes darting back and forth between the screen and the clock, as if he had somewhere more important to be. I watched him, feeling a growing sense of unease. Maybe it was just the stress of his project. But as the minutes ticked by, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. After dinner, I gathered my nerves and took a deep breath. I reached for his hand, just like we had done so many times before when I needed him to listen. "Chad," I said, my voice trembling. "I'm pregnant." Silence, a long, unbearable silence. I could see his face shift, first confusion, then realization, followed by something I never thought I'd see on him. Anger. "You ruined everything," he said, his voice sharp, as if the words had been waiting to escape for a long time. "I didn't want this child." I felt the floor slip out from under me. His words hit like a physical blow, and I was gasping for air. "What do you mean?" I whispered, struggling to understand. He continued, each word driving the knife deeper into my heart. "I never wanted kids. I was just going along with it to keep you happy. But it was never real to me." My mind raced, my heart raced. "Is there someone else?" I blurted out, barely able to ask, but needing to know. Without hesitation, he answered, "Vanessa." Vanessa, his colleague. The woman who had been in our lives. The one he'd always praised at work. The one who was always brilliant and full of ideas. The woman he had been seeing for months behind my back. I couldn't breathe. The world tilted on its axis. And everything I thought I knew about my marriage shattered into pieces. How had I been so blind? How had I let this happen? And then, just like that, he was gone. He didn't look back. He grabbed his things, walked out the door, and left me standing in the wreckage of our life. No explanation. No apology, just a cold goodbye. And just like that, I was left to pick up the pieces alone, pregnant and heartbroken. The silence that followed Chad's departure was deafening. I didn't know how long I sat there, staring at the door, at the empty space where he had just been. 1 minute, we were sharing a quiet dinner, and the next, my world had crumbled. My stomach churned, not from the pregnancy, but from the overwhelming sense of betrayal that twisted through me. I was pregnant, and Chad was gone, leaving me alone with nothing but questions and heartbreak. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't move. I sat there in a daze, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. And then, in a small, quiet voice, I picked up my phone. The first name I scrolled to was Julie. My best friend. The one I had always relied on. I needed someone to tell me everything was going to be okay, even if I didn't believe it. Julie picked up on the first ring. "Melissa, what's wrong?" Her voice was full of concern. She must have heard something in my voice because the next thing I knew, she was at my door, pushing it open without even knocking. I don't know what to do, Jules," I whispered, my voice barely audible as I led her into the living room. I collapsed onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. He left me for her, for Vanessa. Julie didn't need me to explain further. She sat next to me, wrapping her arms around me, letting me cry. She didn't say anything, at first, just held me. That's what she was good at, holding me together when everything else fell apart. It felt like hours before the tears slowed down, enough for me to talk again. I finally lifted my head and looked at Julie, who was sitting beside me, her face soft with sympathy. "I don't understand," I said, trying to steady my voice. "How could he do this? How could he leave us, for her? Julie shifted uncomfortably beside me, her gaze faltering for just a moment. I saw her lips press together, her fingers fiddling nervously in her lap. There was something in her eyes, a hesitation, a guilt I couldn't quite place. Jules, I whispered, confused by her reaction. She looked at me, her eyes full of conflict. There's something I need to tell you, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. I sat up straighter, my heart pounding in my chest. What is it? What's going on? Julie took a deep breath, as though gathering the strength to speak the words. I was with Chad, Melissa, when he left. I didn't know what to do. We were both hurting, and I didn't want to be alone. The world seemed to stop for a moment. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt like the room was closing in on me. What? My voice barely formed the word. I shook my head, unable to process what I was hearing. You and Chad. Julie nodded, her eyes filled with sorrow. I'm so sorry, Melissa. I should have told you sooner. I should have never let it happen. But I was so lost, and Chad was there. I didn't mean to hurt you. It was a mistake. Julie, my best friend, my rock, had betrayed me too. The pain was unbearable. I stood up, feeling dizzy, my legs unsteady. How could you, Julie? The words left my mouth, sharp and accusing before I could stop them. You knew how much I loved him. You knew how much I depended on you. Her face crumpled with guilt. I never meant for it to happen this way. I don't even know what came over me. I didn't know how to handle everything either. But that's no excuse. I'm so sorry. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? My mind was racing, a storm of emotions flooding through me. First Chad, and now Julie. I felt as though the people I trusted most had turned against me. Without another word, I turned and walked toward the door. I need some space. Julie. I can't talk right now. Julie didn't stop me. She didn't say anything else as I stepped outside for some fresh air. But I could hear her soft sobs behind me, and something inside me broke, because I knew that no matter how much she apologized, the damage was done. The trust I'd placed in her had been shattered, just like everything else in my life. I sat on the steps outside, letting the cold night air sting my skin, hoping it would numb the ache in my chest. But there was no numbness, only a quiet, deep pain that would take time to heal. I had been betrayed, not once, but twice, and now, it was just me and the baby. We would have to face whatever came next, alone. The month after Chad left felt like a blur. I had hoped for some clarity, some sense of relief, but instead, I found myself sinking deeper into a routine that was at once exhausting and overwhelming. It wasn't just the physical toll of pregnancy, although that alone was enough to leave me drained every day. It was the emotional weight, feeling abandoned, hurt, betrayed. But with each passing day, I learned to adjust. The first step was scheduling my first prenatal appointment. I was nervous, scared even. But as soon as the technician placed the cold gel on my stomach and the heartbeat of my baby filled the room, I felt something shift inside me. This was real. This was happening. I wasn't alone in this anymore. It wasn't just me anymore. It was me and Tiago. I felt a sense of responsibility, but also a fierce resolve. I would raise my child, and I would do it alone if I had to. Started researching everything I needed to know about raising a child on my own, childcare options, budgeting, what baby supplies I absolutely had to have. It was overwhelming, but it felt empowering in a way. Slowly, I found my footing. I began to make a plan. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was mine. My life was in my hands now, and I was going to make sure Tiago had everything he needed. Months later, just when I thought I had started to find a semblance of peace, Chad reached out. His message was short, but to the point. We need to talk. At first, I didn't respond. I didn't want to deal with him, but then his mother called, and I could hear the guilt in her voice. She said, he wants to do better, Melissa, for Tiago's sake. Can't you just hear him out? I didn't want to. I really didn't. But something in me faltered. Maybe it was because I still didn't want to be the bad guy. Maybe it was because I was tired of feeling like everything was falling apart. So I agreed to meet. When I walked into the room where Chad and his parents sat, I felt the weight of their expectations pressing down on me. Chad's face was soft, but his eyes were searching, desperate. I thought a lot about what I did. He said, his voice shaky. I want to be there for Tiago. I've changed. I'm ready to be a father now. His parents nodded in unison. their expressions full of concern. "You're being unfair, Melissa," Rebecca said. "He's trying. But this is about more than just you, it's about Tiago. You can't shut him out." The pressure was suffocating. For a moment, I began to question myself. Was I making the right choice? Was I being too harsh, too stubborn? Maybe Chad was sincere. Maybe he really did want to try. But then I remembered everything: his departure, his affair with Vanessa, the way he walked out without a second thought. "I don't need your redemption," I said, my voice steady. "I need someone who will show up for us every single day, not just when it's easy or when it makes them feel better." Chad's face fell. But I didn't waver. His parents looked at me with disappointment. But I wasn't going to let them guilt me into making a decision that wasn't right for Tiago. "Goodbye, Chad," I said, my voice firm. "I'm moving forward without you." As I left the room, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. For the first time since that night he walked out on me, I knew I had made the right choice. Tiago and I were going to be fine, and I wasn't going to let anyone, especially Chad, take that away from me. I hadn't heard from Vanessa since that night I learned of her affair with Chad. The anger, the betrayal, it had all seemed so final. She had been the other woman, the one who had torn apart everything I thought I knew. But then one afternoon, I saw her name flash across my phone. I hesitated before answering. Part of me wanted to slam the phone down, to pretend she didn't exist. But another part of me felt like I needed to face this. I needed to confront her, if for no other reason than to find some catharsis, some closure. "So," I answered, "Melissa, I know this might be the last thing you want to hear from me." Vanessa's voice came through, shaky but sincere. "But I wanted to reach out. I owe you an apology. I've been thinking about what happened with Chad, and I regret everything. I never meant to hurt you." I sat in silence for a moment. Regret. It was hard to believe. How could she regret something she'd willingly participated in? But as I listened to her voice tremble with genuine remorse, I felt something stir inside me. A mix of rage and something softer. Was it curiosity, or maybe just a need to understand? "What do you want, Vanessa?" I asked, trying to keep the bitterness from seeping into my voice. I want you to know the truth. I've been carrying guilt too, and I know that doesn't excuse anything. But I need you to hear it from me. Chad lied to both of us. I believed him when he said he was unhappy, that he needed space from you. He manipulated me into thinking you didn't care about him the way I did. But looking back, I see the pattern. He did it to both of us. He was emotionally unavailable to me, just like he was to you. Our relationship was never what he made it out to be. Chad wasn't just unfaithful, he was a liar, a manipulator, and I had been blind. He lied to me too. Vanessa continued, her voice quiet. "He told me you were controlling, that you were holding him back. He said he couldn't be himself with you anymore. But now I know it was all him. All his insecurities. He didn't want a family, he just wanted freedom. I wasn't the answer to that, I was just his escape." Her words rattled me. It wasn't just that Chad had cheated. It was the realization that I had spent so long blaming myself for everything that went wrong in our marriage. He had never been honest with me. All the cracks I had seen, the distance I had felt, had been his doing. He had painted me as the villain in his own story. And I had believed it. I felt anger rising in me, hot and sharp. But it wasn't just anger at Vanessa anymore. It was anger at Chad, at how he had manipulated both of us into thinking we were the problem. But as the anger simmered, something else took over, a sense of relief. I had been right all along. Vanessa's confession wasn't just an apology, it was the closure I needed. The truth was out there, and I could finally start to let go of the weight I had been carrying. No, I hadn't been perfect, but I hadn't been the sole cause of everything falling apart. I wasn't the one who had broken us. Chad had done that. With his lies, his deceit, his refusal to take responsibility for his own actions. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Vanessa said softly. "But I needed to say this. You deserve to know the truth." I let out a long breath. "Thank you, Vanessa," I said, the weight in my chest beginning to lift. I needed to hear it, even if it doesn't change anything. As I ended the call, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. It wasn't the relief of knowing that Chad had finally been exposed. It was the peace of realizing that I no longer needed his validation. For so long I had been waiting for him to come back, to apologize. To make everything right. But that wasn't going to happen. And I was okay with that now. Vanessa had been part of the pain. But she had also helped me see that the healing could finally begin. The only person I needed to answer to now was myself. The truth had set me free. And for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally starting to heal. I didn't need Chad. And I didn't need Vanessa. All I needed was Tiago. And the future I was building for us. And that was more than enough. The years that followed were a blur of growth, pain, and transformation. There was a time when I thought I would never be able to pick up the pieces of my life after Chad walked out, but here I was, standing on the other side of it all. Stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever the future held. Raising Tiago alone was never easy, but every day became more manageable. I found a rhythm, the late nights, the sleepless mornings, the balancing act between work and motherhood. Somehow, I did it, and I did it with a sense of pride I hadn't known I could feel. My job, though demanding, gave me a sense of purpose. Beyond being Tiago's mom. It was the stability I needed. Both financially and emotionally. I moved us into a new home, one that was ours. With a little backyard where Tiago could run around and play. It was simple, but it was ours, and it felt like the fresh start we both deserved. Julie was still in my life, of course, but things were different now. Our friendship had evolved in ways I hadn't expected. I had forgiven her for the betrayal, but trust was something that took longer to rebuild. There were times when I still questioned her motives, but I realized that forgiveness didn't always mean forgetting. It meant acknowledging what had happened and learning to move forward with a stronger sense of self. Julie respected that boundary. And in time, we found our way back to each other. But now, I kept my heart a little more guarded. I wasn't the same person I was before everything had fallen apart, and I wasn't going to let the same mistakes happen again. Then came Douglas Pierce. He was a widowed father who had a daughter in Tiago's class. Our children became fast friends, and soon, we found ourselves at the same school events, soccer games, and play dates. At first, I didn't see it. How could I? I was still healing, still figuring out who I was, but as time passed, I started to notice the way Douglas looked at me, not with pity, not with judgment, but with understanding. He was patient, letting our friendship grow at its own pace. He never pushed me to feel anything I wasn't ready for. His kindness, his warmth. And the way he treated Tiago like his own son was something I hadn't realized I'd been missing. We shared stories, laughter, and even some quiet moments when words weren't needed. Through our connection, I began to picture a future with someone who truly saw me, not as a single mom who had been abandoned, but as a woman who had endured, who had rebuilt, and who had a future worth sharing. Douglas was that future. And for the first time since Chad left, I felt ready to embrace love again, not just for me but for Tiago too. But as the past always seems to do, it found a way back into our lives. Chad reached out. His message was simple, yet heavy. I want to see Tiago. I regret not being there for him. I want to try again. I had to take a deep breath before responding. The old wounds, the bitterness, and the hurt came flooding back in an instant. I agreed to meet him, but only on my terms. He sat across from me. His face older, more worn, but still carrying that same sense of entitlement I'd grown so familiar with. He spoke of regret, of missing out on his son's life, of wanting a second chance to be the father he never was. But this time I didn't feel the pull. His words, though remorseful, felt like a last-ditch attempt at redemption. Too little, too late. No, Chad, you made your choice. Tiago and I are fine without you, I said, my voice calm but unwavering. Chad looked hurt, but I didn't care. I had no more room for him in my life. He had already shown me who he was. I had built a new family, a real family, one based on love, trust, and consistency. I turned to Douglas later that night. As we sat together in the living room, the quiet hum of our home wrapping around us like a comforting blanket, I told him everything that had happened with Chad, and in that moment I knew this was it. This was the future I had created. I didn't need Chad. I didn't need his approval or his presence in our lives. I had Tiago, who was growing into an amazing little boy, and I had Douglas, who had shown me that love didn't always have to come with conditions. It could come with patience. Understanding, and a willingness to build something real. As I looked at Douglas, I knew he was the one I wanted to share my life with. Not because I had to, but because he chose us. he chose me and Tiago. And for the first time in years, I could honestly say that everything was finally okay. Tiago had the family he deserved, and I had the life I had fought so hard to create. We were whole, we were enough.